Tonight, we are going to travel slowly into a quieter world. A world before electric light, before glowing screens, before the endless hum of modern machines. For most of human history, when the sun disappeared, life changed completely. Darkness was not simply an inconvenience. It shaped the rhythm of human existence itself. Evenings became softer, slower, and far more silent than we are used to today. There were no illuminated streets stretching into the distance, no televisions flickering in dark rooms, no phones buzzing beside the bed. Instead, people lived closely beside candlelight, fireplaces, moonlight, and the changing seasons. And so tonight, we will gently wander through those forgotten evenings. We will sit beside ancient hearth fires, walk through quiet medieval cottages, listen to rain against wooden roofs, and explore the small and ordinary ways people passed time before electricity transformed the night forever. So settle in comfortably, and let us begin. For most people in history, darkness arrived early, especially during winter, in small villages across Europe, in farming communities, and in isolated cottages surrounded by forest or open fields. The setting sun marked the gradual end of activity. Without electricity, light required work. Candles had to be made carefully from wax or animal fat. Lamp oil was expensive. Firewood needed to be gathered, chopped, dried, and carried indoors. Nothing about illumination was effortless. And because light was precious, people used it sparingly. A single candle might serve an entire family for an evening. Its flame would flicker softly at the center of the room, casting long shadows onto uneven walls. Beyond that small circle of warm light, the corners of the house faded into darkness. Outside, the night became deep and quiet. Roads disappeared into blackness. Fields vanished from view, and distant forests became mysterious shapes beneath the moon. For many people, the night encouraged stillness. There was little reason to rush. No bright stores remained open late into the evening. No glowing clocks reminded people of schedules every few minutes. Time itself felt slower, and so people adapted to the rhythm of darkness. Many families gathered together in one room during the evening hours, not for entertainment in the modern sense, but for warmth, company, and shared routine. Children sat near fireplaces wrapped in wool blankets. Parents repaired tools or clothing. Grandparents rested in wooden chairs beside the fire. And somewhere nearby, a kettle simmered quietly above glowing embers. The sounds were gentle. The soft crackling of wood. The occasional movement of chairs across rough floors. Wind pressing lightly against shutters. The faint whistle of cold air slipping through old walls. To modern ears, the silence of these evenings would feel almost startling. But for those who lived then, it was simply normal life. And perhaps, in some quiet way, comforting. In many homes, one of the most common evening activities was sewing. Clothing in the past was valuable. Far more valuable than modern clothing is today. Fabric required enormous labor to produce. Wool had to be cleaned, spun, woven, dyed, and stitched entirely by hand. A single shirt could represent weeks of work. And because clothing was precious, people repaired garments constantly. Small tiers were carefully stitched closed. Buttons were replaced one by one. Socks were mended repeatedly until the fabric became too thin to survive another repair. Evenings often became devoted to these quiet repetitive tasks. Hands moved steadily beneath candlelight. Needles passed softly through cloth. Thread unwound slowly from wooden spools. And conversations drifted gently through the room. Nobody hurried. There was no urgency in the work. Only rhythm. Many people found comfort in repetition, especially during long winters. Outside, snow might gather silently across rooftops and empty roads. Inside, warmth and routine created a feeling of safety. A person might spend hours repairing a coat, listening to the storm outside, while shadows danced quietly along the walls. And after enough evenings like this, The motions themselves became familiar and calming. Stitch, pull, fold, tie, repeat. Again and again. Long before television, people filled their evenings with stories. Storytelling was one of humanity's oldest forms of entertainment. But unlike modern entertainment, stories moved slowly. A tale did not need dramatic twists every few moments. It could wander peacefully through details. Descriptions of weather, travel, meals, villages, and ordinary people often occupied much of the story itself. In many homes, older family members became storytellers. Children gathered close beside the fire while grandparents spoke from memory. Some stories were legends passed down for generations. Others were local tales about strange travelers, old storms, lost animals, or events remembered from decades earlier. And because books were rare for much of history, stories lived inside people rather than on shelves. Many tales changed slightly each time they were told. Details drifted over the years. Characters became softer around the edges. But repetition was part of the comfort. Children often heard the same stories many times, and instead of becoming bored, they found reassurance in the familiar rhythm of known words. The storyteller paused often, not for dramatic effect, but naturally, to warm their hands near the fire, to sip tea, to think quietly before continuing. The room itself became part of the storytelling experience. The smell of smoke, the creaking of wooden beams, the flicker of candlelight across tired faces, all of it blended gently together. In wealthier homes, reading aloud became another common evening ritual. Books were expensive possessions. Some families owned only one or two, often a Bible, a prayer book, or a cherished collection of poems and essays. Because books were rare, reading became communal. One person read aloud while others listened nearby. And unlike modern reading, the pace was slow. Candles provided limited light. Eyes tired easily. Words were spoken carefully. Sometimes people paused simply to reflect quietly on a passage before continuing. In the 18th and 19th centuries, reading aloud after supper became especially popular among middle-class families. A father might read newspaper articles beside the fireplace. Children listened while pretending not to be sleepy. Tea cooled slowly in porcelain cups. Rain tapped gently against windows. And outside, entire streets remained dark except for scattered lanterns glowing faintly in the distance. Without electricity, night felt larger, more complete. Darkness was not interrupted constantly by artificial light. And because of this, even small pools of candlelight felt deeply comforting. For many people, music also filled quiet evenings. Not polished performances, not concerts, but simple familiar sounds. Someone might play a fiddle softly beside the fire, a flute carved from wood, a small harp, or simply sing quietly while working. Music before electricity was often woven naturally into ordinary life. People sang while sewing, while cooking, while rocking children to sleep. Folk songs passed through generations the same way stories did. Not perfectly preserved, but gently carried forward through memory. The songs themselves were often slow and repetitive. Easy to remember, easy to sing after long days of work. In farming communities, winter evenings sometimes became opportunities for shared gatherings. Neighbors visited one another after sunset. Boots tracked snow across wooden floors. Coats hung near the fire to dry. And people sat together speaking softly for hours. Perhaps someone brought bread. Someone else carried cheese or ale. Children grew sleepy beside warm hearths while adults exchanged stories and local news. The atmosphere was rarely loud or dramatic. Life itself required enough energy already. Evenings became places of rest. Small islands of warmth inside long dark nights. Without modern entertainment, people spent far more time simply observing the world around them. Especially the weather. Rainstorms became events in themselves. Snowfall transformed villages into silent landscapes. Thunder echoed across hills without interruption from engines or traffic. And windows became places of reflection. People sat quietly beside them, watching roads disappear into fog, watching travelers pass beneath lantern light, watching branches bend slowly in winter wind. For coastal communities, the sea itself provided endless quiet observation. Waves rolling endlessly against shorelines, fog swallowing distant ships, lighthouse lanterns turning slowly through darkness. A fisherman might spend an entire evening repairing nets beside an open window, listening to rain strike the harbor outside. And because there were fewer distractions, people noticed small details more carefully. The creaking of floors, the hiss of boiling water, the shifting shape of clouds, the changing sound of wind during approaching storms. Silence itself became something people understood intimately, not emptiness, but atmosphere. In taverns and inns, evenings unfolded differently, but still slowly. Before electric lighting, most taverns relied on candles, fireplaces, and oil lamps. Rooms glowed dimly beneath smoke-darkened beams. Travelers warmed themselves beside crowded fires. Ale mugs rested heavily on wooden tables, and conversations drifted lazily through the room. Without loud music or televisions, people spoke directly to one another. Stories stretched across hours. A traveler described distant roads. A farmer complained gently about weather. Someone discussed prices at the market. Card games unfolded patiently beneath flickering light. Dice rolled softly across tabletops. Nobody expected constant stimulation. And because of this, even silence inside taverns felt natural rather than uncomfortable. Some people simply sat quietly listening to the room around them, watching firelight move across walls, listening to rain against windows, resting after long days of travel. Letter writing also occupied many evenings, especially during the 18th and 19th centuries. Without telephones, letters carried enormous emotional importance. Writing one required patience. Ink needed preparation. Paper remained expensive. Pens had to be dipped repeatedly into ink bottles. And handwriting itself demanded concentration. People often wrote slowly and thoughtfully, describing weather, family health, meals, gardens, local events, and ordinary details of daily life. A single letter might take hours to complete, then days or weeks to arrive. And because communication moved slowly, people accepted waiting as part of life. There was less expectation of immediate response, less pressure to remain constantly available. Instead, words traveled gradually across distances, carried by horseback, ships, or railways. And when letters finally arrived, families gathered together to read them aloud. Voices from distant places entered candlelit rooms softly and patiently. For children, evenings before electricity often involved simpler forms of play. Wooden toys, handmade dolls, simple board games, riddles, songs, shadow puppets cast against walls by candlelight. Children learned early how to entertain themselves quietly, especially during long winters when darkness arrived before supper. In some homes, entire families worked together on practical tasks while children listened nearby. A child might shell peas beside the fire, sort wool, polish shoes, or simply watch adults work while growing sleepy beneath blankets. Bedtime itself was different before electric lighting. Bedrooms were colder, darker, and often shared by several family members. People carried candles carefully through hallways before extinguishing them one by one. The house settled gradually into darkness. Outside, only moonlight remained. And in rural areas, the night sky appeared astonishingly bright. Without city lights, stars filled the heavens in enormous numbers. The Milky Way stretched clearly overhead. Owls called from distant trees. Wind moved softly through fields. And human life became very small beneath the vast darkness of the natural world. Historians believe that many people in earlier centuries followed what is sometimes called segmented sleep. Rather than sleeping continuously through the night, people often slept in two separate periods. They might fall asleep shortly after sunset, wake quietly around midnight, remain awake peacefully for an hour or two, and then return to sleep before dawn. During this calm midnight period, some people prayed. Others read quietly beside low candlelight. Some simply sat beside fading fires in silence. The night itself contained pauses, moments without urgency, without noise, without endless information demanding attention. And perhaps this slower rhythm changed the human mind in subtle ways. People had more opportunities for stillness, more opportunities simply to think, or to sit quietly without distraction. As the 19th century progressed, electric light slowly began changing the shape of human evenings. First in cities, then gradually in towns and homes. Streetlights brightened roads that had once disappeared after sunset. Factories extended working hours. Shops remained open later into the night. Darkness itself began retreating. At first, electricity must have felt astonishing. Entire rooms glowing instantly at the press of a switch. No smoke. No dripping wax. No carrying lanterns through hallways. But alongside convenience, something else quietly disappeared. The deep darkness people had known for thousands of years. The long quiet evenings beside firelight. The slow pacing of nighttime itself. Modern life became brighter, faster, and far more crowded with stimulation. Yet traces of the older world still remain. In rainy evenings beside warm lamps. In reading quietly before bed. In knitting, writing, or sitting peacefully while wind moves outside the window. Perhaps some part of us still remembers those slower nights. Those dim cottages. Those winter fires. Those calm conversations unfolding gently beneath candlelight. And perhaps that is why, even now, many people still find comfort in soft lighting, quiet music, and the peaceful feeling of the world slowing down after dark. Tonight, as you rest, you can imagine those older evenings once more. The soft crackle of firewood, the glow of candles against wooden walls, the distant sound of rain outside, a quiet room filled with warmth, stillness, and gentle human presence. No glowing screens. No rushing schedules, only darkness arriving softly, one peaceful hour at a time. Good night.